Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished repairing the broken fence post. The sun was setting over his farm in rural Montana, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He had been working this land for 15 years, ever since he retired from the Marine Corps. The peaceful life suited him well after 3 tours in Afghanistan. His farm wasn't huge, just 40 acres of wheat and corn with a small herd of cattle and some chickens. It was enough to make a living and keep him busy. Marcus preferred the quiet life now. No explosions, no gunfire, just the sound of wind through the wheat and the occasional moo from his cows. As he walked back toward his farmhouse, something felt wrong. The evening was too quiet. Usually his cattle would be moving around, making noise as they settled for the night. Tonight there was nothing. Even the chickens had gone silent. Marcus stopped walking and listened carefully. His military training kicked in automatically. Something was definitely off. He could feel it in his bones, that same sensation he used to get before an ambush in the mountains of Afghanistan. Then he heard it. A low growling sound coming from the direction of his barn. It wasn't like any animal he knew. The sound was deeper, more menacing than a wolf or coyote. It made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Marcus reached for his rifle, which he always carried when working the farm. Wild animals were common in this part of Montana, and he had learned to be prepared. But as he moved closer to investigate, he realized this was no ordinary wild animal. The creatures emerged from behind his barn like shadows. At first glance, they looked like wolves, but they were wrong in every way. They stood nearly 4 feet tall at the shoulder, much larger than any wolf he had ever seen. Their fur was a strange dark blue color that seemed to shimmer in the fading light. Most disturbing of all were their eyes. They glowed with an unnatural silver light. Marcus counted 6 of them as they spread out in a semicircle around him. They moved with intelligence, not like regular animals. Their formation was tactical, designed to cut off his escape routes. These creatures were hunting him like a military unit would hunt an enemy. The lead creature, larger than the others, stepped forward. When it opened its mouth, Marcus saw teeth that were too sharp, too perfect. They looked almost metallic. The creature made a sound that was part growl, part something else entirely. It was like hearing a machine trying to imitate an animal. Marcus raised his rifle but hesitated. These things looked alien, impossible. Was he losing his mind? Had the stress of farm life finally gotten to him? But the logical part of his brain told him it didn't matter. Real or not, these creatures were clearly dangerous. The lead creature tilted its head, studying him. Its silver eyes seemed to analyze every detail of his appearance, his weapon, his stance. Marcus got the uncomfortable feeling that it was evaluating him like a predator evaluates prey. Then the pack began to move. They didn't charge directly at him like normal wolves would. Instead, they began circling him, maintaining their formation. They were herding him, driving him away from his house and toward the open field behind his property. Marcus backed away slowly, keeping his rifle trained on the lead creature. His heart was pounding, but his hands remained steady. Combat experience had taught him to stay calm under pressure, even when facing something impossible. The creatures followed him step by step, never breaking their formation. They moved with perfect coordination, like soldiers following orders. But who was giving the orders? The lead creature hadn't made any sounds that Marcus could interpret as commands. As they pushed him further from his farmhouse, Marcus began to understand their strategy. They were isolating him, cutting him off from shelter and help. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. His cell phone was in the house. He was on his own. The field they were driving him toward was completely open with nowhere to hide. Once they got him there, he would be completely vulnerable. Marcus realized he needed to make a move soon or he would be trapped. He stopped backing up and raised his rifle properly. "That's far enough," he said, more to calm himself than because he thought the creatures would understand. The pack stopped moving. All 6 pairs of silver eyes focused on him with unsettling intensity. The lead creature took another step forward and made that strange sound again. This time, Marcus was sure he heard something mechanical in it, like static from a radio. Marcus aimed at the lead creature and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out across the field, echoing off the distant mountains. The bullet hit the creature center mass exactly where it should have dropped any normal animal. Instead, the creature stumbled backward but remained standing. Where the bullet had hit, Marcus saw sparks, not blood. The fur had been torn away to reveal something that looked like metal plating underneath. The creature shook itself and looked down at the damage, then back at Marcus. If he didn't know better, he would have sworn it looked annoyed rather than hurt. Marcus fired again, aiming for the head this time. The bullet struck true, but again sparks flew instead of blood. The creature's head snapped back from the impact, but it quickly recovered and fixed those silver eyes on him again. Now Marcus understood. These weren't animals at all. They were machines, robots designed to look like wolves. But who had built them? And why were they on his farm? The lead creature opened its mouth and emitted a sound unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. It was like a howl mixed with electronic feedback. The other creatures immediately responded, spreading out wider and beginning to close in. Marcus had 6 shots left in his rifle. 6 mechanical wolves were advancing on him. His bullets barely seemed to affect them. The math wasn't good, but Marcus Chen wasn't the type of man to give up easily. He had faced impossible odds before and survived. He would find a way to survive this too. As the creatures began their final approach, Marcus backed toward a large oak tree at the edge of the field. If he could get his back to something solid, at least they couldn't surround him completely. The lead creature seemed to understand his strategy. It made another electronic sound and the pack began moving faster. Marcus reached the oak tree just as the mechanical wolves began their coordinated attack. With his back against the thick trunk, he could at least see all of them coming. The lead creature had learned from his previous shots and was keeping the pack spread out, making it harder for him to target them effectively. The first wolf lunged at him from the left. Marcus swung his rifle like a club, connecting with the creature's head. The impact sent vibrations up his arms and produced a metallic clang that confirmed these things were definitely machines. The wolf stumbled but quickly regained its footing. A second wolf attacked from the right while Marcus was dealing with the first. Its metal teeth caught his jacket sleeve, tearing through the fabric like it was paper. Marcus jerked his arm free and fired point blank into the creature's face. Sparks flew and the wolf's head twisted at an unnatural angle, but it still didn't go down. Marcus was beginning to understand these machines better. They were tough but not indestructible. His shots were causing damage even if they weren't stopping the creatures immediately. Maybe if he could damage enough of their systems, he could disable them. The pack regrouped and began circling the tree. Marcus counted his remaining ammunition. 4 shots left. He needed to make them count. As he watched the creatures move, Marcus noticed something interesting. The wolf he had hit in the head was moving differently now. Its movements were less coordinated, more jerky. The damage was affecting its systems. Marcus made a decision. Instead of trying to kill them outright, he would focus on disabling them one by one. He aimed carefully at the lead creature's front leg and fired. The bullet struck exactly where he intended, right at what looked like a joint. The wolf's leg buckled and sparked. Now it was limping, moving much slower than before. The other wolves seemed confused by their leader's injury. They milled around uncertainly, their formation breaking down. Marcus capitalized on their confusion and fired at another wolf's rear leg. Again, his shot was true. Sparks flew and the creature stumbled, struggling to maintain its balance. 2 shots left. 4 wolves still mostly functional. The odds were getting better, but Marcus was still outnumbered. The damaged lead wolf made another electronic sound, different from before. This one sounded more urgent, like a distress call. The remaining wolves immediately regrouped and began moving more aggressively. One wolf charged straight at Marcus while the others flanked him. Marcus fired his second-to-last bullet at the charging wolf's head. The shot connected and the creature's head exploded in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. Finally, one was down for good, but now the other wolves were on him. Marcus swung his rifle at the closest one while trying to dodge another that was leaping at him from the side. Metal teeth scraped against the oak bark where his head had been a second before. 1 bullet left. 3 functional wolves, plus the 2 damaged ones that were still dangerous despite their injuries. Marcus felt a sharp pain in his leg as metal teeth found their mark. The wolf had clamped onto his calf and was trying to drag him away from the tree. Marcus gritted his teeth against the pain and brought the butt of his rifle down on the creature's head repeatedly until it let go. Blood was flowing from the bite wound, but Marcus ignored it. He had been hurt worse in Afghanistan and kept fighting. This was no different. The wolves were learning from each attack, adapting their tactics. They were no longer trying to attack him individually. Instead, they were coordinating their movements to overwhelm him all at once. Marcus realized he needed to change his own tactics. Standing and fighting wasn't working. He needed to move, to use his environment to his advantage. As the next wave of attacks began, Marcus dodged to the side and started running. The wolves immediately gave chase, but Marcus had a plan. About 50 yards away was his old barn. Inside were tools, machinery, and maybe better weapons. The wolves were fast, but Marcus had a head start. He could hear their metal claws scratching against the ground as they pursued him. The sound was getting closer with each stride. Marcus reached the barn door and threw it open just as the first wolf caught up to him. He spun around and fired his last bullet directly into the creature's open mouth. The bullet must have hit something critical because the wolf collapsed immediately. Smoke pouring from its head. 2 functional wolves left, plus the 2 damaged ones bringing up the rear. Marcus grabbed a pitchfork from the barn wall and turned to face his pursuers. The metal tines might not be bullets, but they could still do damage to machinery. The first wolf leaped at him and Marcus thrust the pitchfork forward. The metal tines penetrated the creature's chest, sparks flying as they damaged internal components. The wolf's weight drove Marcus backward, but he held onto the pitchfork and pushed it deeper. The second wolf attacked while Marcus was struggling with the first. Its teeth caught his shoulder, tearing through his shirt and drawing blood. Marcus twisted away and pulled the pitchfork free from the first wolf, then swung it at the second creature's head. The impact sent the wolf sprawling, but it quickly recovered. These machines were incredibly resilient. Marcus backed deeper into the barn, looking for anything he could use as a weapon. His eyes fell on his old welding equipment. The acetylene torch was still connected to its tank. As the wolves regrouped for another attack, Marcus grabbed the torch and ignited it. A bright blue flame shot out, casting dancing shadows on the barn walls. The wolves hesitated when they saw the flame. Whatever artificial intelligence controlled them recognized fire as a threat. Marcus took advantage of their hesitation and advanced, sweeping the torch back and forth. The lead wolf tried to dart in from the side, but Marcus caught it with the flame. The creature's fur ignited immediately, and Marcus realized it wasn't actually fur at all, but some kind of synthetic material designed to look like animal hair. As the fake fur burned away, Marcus could see the wolf's true form. It was a sophisticated robot, covered in flexible metal plating that had been designed to mimic the shape and movement of a real wolf. But who had the technology to build something like this? And why were they attacking his farm? The burning wolf stumbled around the barn, its systems failing as the heat damaged its circuits. Marcus pressed his advantage and attacked the remaining functional wolf with the torch. This one was smarter than its companion and stayed just out of reach of the flame. It circled Marcus, looking for an opening. The 2 damaged wolves from the earlier fight had finally caught up and were entering the barn. Marcus was surrounded again, but now he had a weapon that could actually damage them effectively. The torch gave him reach, and the machines clearly feared the fire. As the wolves prepared for a coordinated attack, Marcus heard something that made his blood run cold. In the distance, coming from the direction of the road, he could hear the sound of engines. But these weren't car engines. They sounded mechanical, artificial, like the growls the robot wolves had been making. More of them were coming. The sound of approaching engines grew louder, echoing across Marcus's farm like mechanical thunder. Through the barn's open door, he could see lights moving in the darkness, but they weren't the steady beams of vehicle headlights. These lights pulsed and flickered with an unnatural rhythm. Marcus continued to fend off the robot wolves with his welding torch, but his arms were getting tired from swinging the heavy equipment. The acetylene tank wouldn't last forever, and he could hear the gas pressure beginning to drop. When the flame died, he would be defenseless again. One of the damaged wolves made a desperate lunge at him, its mechanical systems sparking and malfunctioning. Marcus caught it with the torch flame and watched as its internal components melted and fused together. The creature collapsed in a heap of twisted metal and burning synthetic fur. But even as one threat was eliminated, Marcus could see more lights approaching through the darkness. Whatever was coming, it was big. The ground was actually vibrating under his feet, like heavy machinery was rolling across his property. The remaining robot wolves seemed to sense their reinforcements arriving. They became more aggressive, pressing their attack despite the threat of the torch. The lead wolf, still limping from its damaged leg, made a coordinated strike with its remaining functional companion. Marcus swung the torch in a wide arc, forcing both creatures back, but the flame was definitely getting weaker. The torch sputtered and nearly went out before roaring back to life. He had maybe 2 minutes of fuel left. Then, Just as Marcus was preparing to make his last stand, something unexpected happened. A brilliant beam of light cut through the darkness outside the barn, so bright it turned night into day for a brief moment. The beam struck something in the distance and Marcus heard an explosion followed by the sound of tearing metal. The robot wolves froze in place, their silver eyes suddenly flickering. They turned their heads toward the source of the light, and for the first time since the attack began, they seemed uncertain. Another beam of light flashed across the sky, followed by another explosion. This time Marcus could see what was happening. Something was destroying the approaching vehicles, whatever they were. The mechanical engines he had heard were now mixed with sounds of combat, energy weapons firing and metal being torn apart. The robot wolves began making new sounds, rapid electronic chirping that sounded like some kind of communication system. They were receiving orders from somewhere, and those orders were clearly changing their priorities. To Marcus's amazement, the wolves suddenly lost interest in him entirely. They turned and bounded out of the barn, racing toward the sounds of battle. In seconds, he was alone. Marcus cautiously followed them to the barn door, still holding the sputtering torch. What he saw outside defied everything he thought he knew about the world. In his wheat field, a battle was raging between two groups of what could only be described as alien machines. The robot wolves were joining a larger force that included vehicle-sized mechanical creatures that looked like metallic insects. They moved on multiple legs and had weapons mounted where a real insect's head would be. Fighting against them was another group of machines, but these were completely different. They were sleeker, more elegant in design. Instead of trying to mimic Earth animals, they looked like pure technology, smooth curves and flowing lines that seemed almost artistic. The elegant machines were winning. Their weapons were more advanced, firing beams of coherent energy that cut through the animal like robots, like they were made of paper. As Marcus watched, one of the insect vehicles was sliced cleanly in half by a sustained energy beam. But what shocked Marcus most was that the elegant machines seemed to be protecting his farm. They had positioned themselves between the attacking animal robots and his house, and they were systematically destroying every hostile unit they encountered. One of the sleek machines noticed Marcus standing in the barn doorway. It was roughly humanoid in shape but taller than any person, with long limbs and a smooth, featureless head. It raised one arm in what Marcus recognized as a gesture of acknowledgement, then returned to the battle. The fight was over quickly. The animal-like robots were clearly outmatched by their opponent's superior technology. Within minutes, the last of the mechanical wolves and insect vehicles had been destroyed, leaving smoking wreckage scattered across Marcus's property. As the sounds of battle faded, the elegant machines began to regroup. There were maybe a dozen of them, all different in size and configuration but sharing the same smooth, artistic design aesthetic. They moved with fluid grace that made the animal robots seem clumsy by comparison. Marcus's torch finally ran out of fuel with a soft pop. He set it aside and stepped out of the barn, hands raised to show he wasn't armed. His military training told him to be cautious, but these machines had just saved his life. They deserved at least a chance to explain themselves. The humanoid machine that had acknowledged him earlier approached slowly, its movements careful and non-threatening. When it was about 10 feet away, it stopped and tilted its smooth head slightly as if studying him. "Human Marcus Chen," it said in a voice that was clearly artificial but somehow pleasant. "We regret the intrusion upon your territory. The Devourers located you before we could intercept them." Marcus blinked in surprise. Not only could the machine speak English, but it knew his name. "Devourers?" he asked. "The machines that attacked you. They are scouts for a larger force that seeks to catalog and consume all biological life in this sector. Your planet has been marked for harvesting." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Harvesting? What does that mean? Complete biological extraction. Every living thing on Earth would be processed and converted into raw materials for their war machine. Your species would cease to exist. Marcus felt his knees go weak. He sat down heavily on a hay bale that had fallen from his barn. "And you're here to stop them?" "We are the Guardians. We oppose the Devourers wherever they spread their corruption. Your species shows promise that should not be wasted." "Promise?" Marcus looked around at the wreckage scattered across his farm. "We're just farmers and soldiers and ordinary people. What promise could we possibly have to beings like you?" The Guardian machine moved closer, its featureless head turning to survey the destruction. You fought them alone with primitive weapons and nearly succeeded in destroying their entire scouting pack. The Devourers have conquered 17 worlds in this sector. On none of those worlds did the indigenous species mount effective resistance to their scout units. Marcus thought about that. The robot wolves had been tough but not invincible. His rifle had damaged them and the torch had been quite effective. Maybe humans were tougher than they looked. The Devourers chose your farm specifically because their intelligence indicated you were a retired military specialist living in isolation. They believed you would be an easy target for testing their new infiltration units. They were wrong, Marcus said grimly. Indeed. Their error has provided us with valuable intelligence about both their capabilities and your species' potential. More Guardian machines were approaching now, having finished cleaning up the battlefield. They moved silently across the torn earth, their forms seeming to flow rather than walk. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we must prepare. The scout pack will be missed when it fails to report. The Devourers will send a larger force to investigate. Marcus stood up, his farmer's practicality taking over. How much time do we have? Approximately 72 of your hours, 3 days. Marcus looked around at his destroyed farm, at the alien wreckage scattered across his fields, at the impossible machines that had just saved his life. Then we'd better get to work, he said. Marcus spent the next hour walking through his destroyed farm with the Guardian leader, who had introduced itself as architect. The name seemed fitting for a being that thought in terms of building and planning. Architect's smooth metallic form moved gracefully between the scattered wreckage of Devourer machines, occasionally stopping to examine pieces with sensors that emerged from its fingers. Their technology is more advanced than our last encounter, Architect said, picking up a fragment of robot wolf armor. They have improved their camouflage systems and power efficiency. Marcus kicked at a piece of twisted metal that had once been part of an insect vehicle. They seemed pretty breakable to me. These were scouts designed for stealth and intelligence gathering, not combat. The main Devourer force will be much more heavily armed and armored. The reality of the situation was beginning to sink in for Marcus. This wasn't just about his farm anymore. If what Architect said was true, the entire planet was in danger. You said they've conquered 17 worlds, Marcus said. How many Guardian worlds are there? Architect's head turned toward him with what might have been surprise. Guardian worlds? We have no worlds, Marcus Chen. We are what you might call refugees. That stopped Marcus in his tracks. Refugees? From what? The Devourers destroyed our homeworld 3,000 years ago. We are all that remains of our species. 12 ships carrying perhaps 50,000 individuals. Marcus looked around at the dozen Guardian machines on his farm. This is your entire military force? Not entire, but this ship carries most of our remaining warriors. We have spent millennia searching for a species that could help us turn the tide against the Devourers. Most worlds we find are already dead or offer no resistance. But you think humans are different? Architect gestured toward the wreckage. One human alone with primitive weapons destroyed nearly an entire Devourer scout pack. Your species has potential we have not seen elsewhere. Marcus wasn't sure whether to feel honored or terrified. What kind of potential? Adaptation, innovation, stubbornness. Architect seemed to find that last word amusing. The Devourers rely on overwhelming technological superiority. They are not accustomed to enemies who fight back effectively with inferior equipment. Over the next 2 hours, more Guardian ships arrived. Marcus watched in amazement as sleek vessels descended from the night sky, their hulls seeming to bend light around them. They landed silently in his fields, disgorging more Guardian machines of various sizes and configurations. Some Guardians were massive, the size of tanks, but moving with the grace of dancers. Others were small and quick, darting between the larger units like mechanical birds. All of them shared that same elegant, flowing design that seemed more like art than military hardware. Architect introduced Marcus to other Guardian leaders. There was Engineer, whose body was covered in manipulator arms and sensor arrays. Navigator looked almost like a mechanical tree, with branching limbs that constantly moved and adjusted. And Warrior, whose form was clearly designed for combat, with integrated weapons and armor plating that still maintained the graceful Guardian aesthetic. We need to understand human military capabilities, Warrior said, its voice deeper and more resonant than Architect's. Your performance against the scouts was impressive, but we must know what your species can accomplish on a larger scale. Marcus thought about that. How much time do we have before they come back? Less than 60 hours now. Engineer replied, its multiple arms gesturing as it spoke. We have been monitoring Devourer communications. They are assembling a significant force. Then we need to contact my government, Marcus said. The military, specifically. They need to know what's coming. Architect's head tilted. Will they believe you? Marcus looked around at the alien machine surrounding him, at the wreckage of robot wolves scattered across his property. Probably not at first. But I know people who will listen long enough for you to prove it. Within an hour, Marcus was on the phone with his old commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Martinez. It took some convincing, but eventually she agreed to fly out with a small team to investigate his unusual situation. Marcus didn't try to explain everything over the phone. Some things had to be seen to be believed. While they waited for the military team to arrive, the Guardians began their own preparations. Marcus watched in fascination as they rapidly constructed what could only be described as a fortress around his farm. The buildings rose from the ground like plants growing in fast forward, their surfaces smooth and seamless. How are you doing that? Marcus asked Engineer, watching walls flow upward like liquid metal before solidifying. Programmable matter, Engineer explained. We reshape materials at the molecular level. Very useful for rapid construction. The fortress that emerged around Marcus's property was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls curved and flowed, following the natural contours of the land. Weapon emplacements grew from the structure like flowers, their sleek barrels tracking across the sky. Everything was connected, forming a single integrated defense system. This is incredible, Marcus said, walking through corridors that seemed to pulse with soft light. Why didn't you just build something like this on every world the Devourers attacked? Because we never had time, Warrior replied. By the time we learned of Devourer attacks, the worlds were already lost. Your world is different. The scouts found you first before the main force. That has given us the opportunity to prepare. Marcus was beginning to understand the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just first contact with aliens. This was possibly humanity's only chance to avoid extinction. Colonel Martinez arrived 18 hours later with a team of 6 soldiers and 2 scientists. Marcus met them at the edge of his property, where the Guardian fortress now rose from what had been his wheat field. Jesus Christ, Marcus, Colonel Martinez said, staring at the alien structure. What the hell happened here? Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully, Marcus said. Everything I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, but I need you to hear me out. He told her everything, starting with the attack by the robot wolves and ending with the Guardian fortress. Colonel Martinez listened without interruption, her face growing more concerned with each detail. Marcus, she said finally, you know how this sounds, right? I know exactly how it sounds. That's why I asked you to come see for yourself. As if on cue, Architect emerged from the fortress entrance. The Guardian moved with its characteristic fluid grace, approaching the group of humans slowly and carefully. Colonel Martinez, Architect said, its voice carrying clearly across the distance. We welcome you to this gathering of allies. The soldiers immediately raised their weapons, but Colonel Martinez held up a hand to stop them. She stared at Architect for a long moment, then looked back at Marcus. This is really happening, isn't it? I'm afraid so, Sarah. And we have less than 2 days to get ready for something much worse. Colonel Martinez was a career soldier who had seen combat in 3 different countries. She was practical, intelligent, and not easily shaken. Marcus watched as she processed the situation, moving from shock to acceptance to determination in the space of a few seconds. What do you need from us? She asked Architect. Access to your military leadership, Architect replied. The Devourers will not limit their attack to this location. They will strike your major population centers simultaneously. Your species must be warned and prepared. Colonel Martinez nodded grimly. I'll make some calls. But in the meantime, what can we do here? Warrior stepped forward, its weapon systems visible but not threatening. Learn, fight, survive. If we can defeat the Devourer force here, it will be the first time in 3,000 years that they have been stopped. It will show other species that resistance is possible. Marcus looked around at the impossible fortress surrounding his farm, at the alien allies who had chosen to make their stand here, at the soldiers who were about to help fight for the survival of their species. No pressure, he muttered. But despite the enormity of what they faced, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since his military days. The clarity that came with having a clear mission and good people to fight alongside. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation and coordination. Colonel Martinez had contacted the Pentagon, and after several increasingly frantic phone calls involving video evidence of Guardian technology, the full weight of the U.S. military began to mobilize. Fighter jets screamed overhead every few hours, and convoy after convoy of military vehicles rolled down the rural Montana roads toward Marcus's farm. But it wasn't just American forces. Once the initial shock wore off and world leaders realized this was a genuine extinction-level threat, the response became global. British SAS, German GSG-9, Russian Spetsnaz, Chinese Special Forces, and elite units from dozens of other nations began, arriving at hastily constructed staging areas around the Guardian fortress. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of being a liaison between humanity and an alien species. The Guardians had chosen to work primarily through him, since he was the first human they had encountered and fought alongside. He spent his time translating not just languages, but entire ways of thinking. "They don't understand our military hierarchy," Marcus explained to General Harrison, who had flown in from the Pentagon to take overall command. "The Guardians operate more like a collective consciousness. They don't have ranks the way we do." "Then how do they make decisions?" General Harrison asked, studying the tactical displays that showed Guardian and human forces positioning around the fortress. "They reach consensus through something like debate, but much faster than we could manage. Architect seems to be their primary strategic thinker, but any of them can contribute ideas or override decisions if they have better information." General Harrison shook his head. "That would never work with human forces." "Maybe not," Marcus said, "but it's kept them alive for 3,000 years while fighting a superior enemy." The cultural exchange went both ways. The Guardians were fascinated by human military doctrine, particularly concepts like small unit tactics and asymmetric warfare. Warriors spent hours with human special forces operators, learning about ambush techniques and improvised weapons. "Your species has a talent for making the best of limited resources," Warrior observed to Marcus during one of these sessions. "The Devourers have never faced enemies who could adapt so quickly to changing circumstances." Engineer was equally impressed with human engineering solutions. "Your technology is primitive but elegant," it told the human technical teams. "You achieve remarkable results with minimal resources. This efficiency could be very useful against the Devourers." The fortress continued to grow and evolve as more Guardian ships arrived. What had started as a simple defensive structure around Marcus's farm was becoming something that resembled a small city. Living quarters for the human forces grew from the Guardian structures like organic additions. Command centers emerged where human and Guardian leaders could coordinate their efforts. Marcus's farmhouse, miraculously, remained intact in the center of it all. The Guardians had built around it rather than over it, treating it as a kind of memorial to where the alliance had begun. "Contact," Navigator announced suddenly, its tree-like form straightening as sensor data flowed through its branching limbs. "Devourer ships have entered your solar system." The fortress erupted into activity. Human soldiers took their positions while Guardian machines moved to their assigned stations. In the command center, Marcus watched the tactical displays alongside General Harrison and Architect. "How many ships?" General Harrison asked. 17 combat vessels, Navigator replied, plus support craft. Approximately 2,000 individual Devourer units. Marcus felt his heart sink. The Guardian force numbered only a few hundred machines, and while the human forces were substantial, they were essentially armed with primitive weapons compared to what was coming. "Remember," Architect said, seeming to sense his despair, "we are not trying to win a conventional victory. We need only to prove that the Devourers can be defeated. If we can destroy even half their force, it will be a greater loss than they have suffered in centuries." The first phase of the attack came from orbit. Devourer ships began bombarding major population centers around Earth with focused energy beams. The Guardian shields extended over the most critical targets, but they couldn't protect everything. Reports streamed in of cities under attack: New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing. But the orbital bombardment wasn't meant to destroy Earth's population. It was a distraction. While the world's attention was focused on the cities under attack, the main Devourer force was landing in remote areas around the globe, including the Montana plains surrounding Marcus's farm. "They're trying to flank us," General Harrison observed. watching the landing patterns on the tactical display. "No," Warrior corrected. "They are trying to isolate us. The Devourers know we are here. They want to cut off our reinforcements and destroy us before we can coordinate with other human forces." Marcus studied the landing patterns more carefully. The Devourer ships were indeed forming a perimeter around their position, but it was a loose one. They're being cautious, he realized. They expected to find a defeated human population, not an organized defense. "That gives us an advantage," General Harrison said. "They're not sure what they're facing." The first ground contact came 2 hours after the orbital landings. Devourer scout units approached the fortress perimeter, moving in the same coordinated patterns Marcus remembered from the robot wolves. But these machines were larger, more heavily armed, and accompanied by floating weapons platforms that hovered above the battlefield like mechanical vultures. The human forces opened fire first. Artillery shells and missile strikes hammered the advancing Devourer units, scoring hits but causing less damage than expected. The Devourer machines were built to withstand heavy weapons. Then the Guardian weapons joined the battle. Beams of coherent energy sliced through the air, striking Devourer units with surgical precision. Where human weapons had only damaged the enemy machines, Guardian energy weapons cut through them like they were made of paper. But the Devourers adapted quickly. After losing the first wave of scouts, they began using terrain and cover more effectively. They spread out their formations and approached from multiple directions simultaneously, forcing the defenders to split their fire. Marcus found himself in one of the forward observation posts, coordinating between human spotters and Guardian targeting systems. Through his binoculars, he watched a squad of human Marines engage a group of Devourer machines that looked like mechanical spiders the size of cars. The Marines were using standard infantry tactics, but Marcus could see they were having limited effect. Their bullets and grenades were damaging the spider machines but not stopping them. "Warrior," Marcus called into his radio. "The Marines in Sector 7 need support." "Acknowledged," came the reply. And moments later a beam of Guardian energy swept across the battlefield, severing the legs of 2 spider machines and sending them crashing to the ground. But Marcus noticed something else. The Marines immediately adjusted their tactics, focusing their fire on the disabled machines to finish them off. They were learning from the Guardian weapons, using them as force multipliers rather than trying to compete with them. "That's it," Marcus said suddenly, an idea forming in his mind. "We're thinking about this wrong." "What do you mean?" General Harrison asked through the radio. "We keep trying to match the Devourer's weapon for weapon, but humans don't fight that way. We fight smart. We use teamwork and adaptation." Marcus grabbed his radio and switched to the general command frequency. "All units, this is Marcus Chen. New tactical protocol. Human forces focus on mobility and harassment. Get the Devourers moving. Keep them off balance. Guardian forces provide precision strikes on targets of opportunity." The change in tactics was immediate and dramatic. Instead of trying to hold static positions, human forces began moving constantly, striking at Devourer units and then falling back before they could be pinned down. The Devourers, designed for overwhelming frontal assault, struggled to adapt to this guerrilla-style warfare. Guardian forces, freed from the need to provide area defense, could focus their superior weapons on critical targets. They began picking off Devourer command units and heavy weapons, disrupting the enemy's coordination. The battle raged for 6 hours. Wave after wave of Devourer machines crashed against the combined human Guardian defense, and each wave was smaller than the last. The alien invaders were taking heavy casualties, but so were the defenders. Marcus watched the casualty reports with growing concern. They were winning, but at a terrible cost. Too many good people were dying. Then Navigator made an announcement that changed everything. Additional contacts detected. Multiple ships approaching from deep space. Marcus felt his heart sink. More Devourers meant the battle was lost, but Architect's response surprised him. "Those are not Devourer ships," the Guardian leader said, its voice carrying what sounded like amazement. "Those are Zephyrian vessels." "Who are the Zephyrians?" General Harrison asked. "Another species the Devourers conquered 50 years ago. We thought they were extinct." On the tactical display, new contacts began appearing. Ships that were clearly not Devourer design were entering Earth's solar system, and they were heading straight for the battle zone. 6 months after the Battle of Chen Farm, as historians were already calling it, Marcus found himself standing in the command center of Sanctuary Station, humanity's first joint facility with alien allies. The station orbited a liberated world in what had once been Devourer space, serving as headquarters for the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Through the massive viewports, Marcus could see ships from a dozen different species coming and going. The Alliance had grown beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Each week brought news of another survivor species emerging from hiding, inspired by the victory at Earth. The latest intelligence reports are encouraging, engineer said. Its multiple arms working at data terminals around the command center. We've successfully liberated 47 worlds in the past 5 months. The Devourers are retreating to their core systems. Marcus studied the tactical displays showing the current state of the galactic war. What had begun as a desperate defense of one farm had evolved into a coordinated campaign across hundreds of star systems. Red markers showed Devourer-controlled territory shrinking steadily as Blue Alliance markers expanded. Any word from the Christek expedition? Marcus asked. The Christek were a species of silicon-based life forms who had been hiding in asteroid fields for 2,000 years. Their unique biology made them immune to most Devourer weapons, and their crystalline ships could slice through enemy armor like it was soft cheese. They have agreed to join the Alliance, Navigator reported, its tree-like form swaying with what Marcus had learned to recognize as excitement. Their fleet will arrive next week. Commander Zephys entered the command center, her crystalline skin reflecting the light from the tactical displays. Over the months, Marcus had learned to read Zephyrian expressions, and right now she looked concerned. We have a problem, she announced. Our long-range scouts have detected massive Devourer fleet movements toward the Nexus system. Marcus felt his heart sink. The Nexus system was the hub of the Alliance's communication network, a strategically vital position that allowed coordination between all the liberated worlds. If the Devourers took it, they could cut the Alliance in half. How massive? General Harrison asked. He had been promoted to Alliance Supreme Commander, and now coordinated military operations across the entire galaxy. Over 5,000 ships, Commander Zephys replied. It's the largest Devourer fleet we've ever detected. They're bringing everything they have. Architect moved to the central display, its smooth form reflecting the red markers that represented the approaching Devourer armada. This is their counterattack. They have realized that our alliance threatens their very existence. They mean to crush us before we can grow stronger. Marcus studied the numbers. The Alliance had managed to assemble nearly 3,000 ships from all member species, but they were facing almost twice that number of Devourer vessels. The odds were grim. We knew this was coming eventually, Marcus said. The Devourers couldn't let us keep winning. They had to respond with everything they had. The question is whether we're ready for them, General Harrison said grimly. Over the next 72 hours, the Alliance mobilized every available ship and warrior. Human vessels, their hulls enhanced with Guardian technology, formed up alongside the elegant Zephyrian crystal ships. Guardian war machines that had survived 3,000 years of conflict took their positions next to Christek. Asteroid miners converted for battle. But the most significant addition to the Alliance fleet was unexpected. Just as the forces were preparing to depart for the Nexus system, a massive ship appeared at the edge of the solar system. It was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. A vessel so large it had its own gravity well, with a hull that seemed to be made of living metal. Unknown vessel. Please identify yourself, Commander Zephys transmitted. The response came in a voice that was ancient beyond measure, speaking in harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. We are the ancients. We are the ones who came before. Marcus had heard legends of the ancients from other Alliance species. They were supposedly the first spacefaring race in the galaxy, so old that they had transcended physical existence eons ago. Most Alliance members believed they were myths. We have watched your struggle with interest, the ancient voice continued. For the first time in our memory, the younger races have shown they can work together against extinction. This is worthy of our attention. The ancient ship moved closer to the Alliance fleet, its presence seeming to affect space itself. Reality bent around its hull, creating visual distortions that hurt to look at directly. We offer our assistance in the battle to come, the ancients announced. Not because we fear the Devourers, but because we wish to see what you will become if you survive. The addition of ancient technology to the Alliance fleet was like adding a supernova to a campfire. Weapons that could unmake matter at the subatomic level, shields that existed in folded space, propulsion systems that moved ships through dimensions humans couldn't even name. But perhaps more importantly, the ancients brought knowledge. They shared the location of the Devourer home system, a secret that had been hidden for millennia. They revealed the true origin of the Devourer species, ancient machines created by a long-dead race as weapons of war, but which had outlived their creators and continued their programming to consume and destroy. The Devourers are not evil in the way you understand it, the ancient voice explained as the combined fleet prepared to jump to the Nexus system. They are tools that have forgotten their purpose, continuing to function long after their creators turned to dust. They cannot be negotiated with or reasoned with because they are not truly alive. They simply are. The Battle of Nexus was the largest space combat engagement in galactic history. Over 8,000 ships clashed in a three-dimensional battlefield that stretched across an entire star system. Energy weapons that could crack planets lit up the darkness between worlds, while fighters and bombers darted through debris fields created by destroyed capital ships. Marcus commanded the human contingent from the bridge of the newly constructed USS Alliance, humanity's first true starship. Built with Guardian technology and crewed by volunteers from Earth, it represented everything humanity had become since first contact. Devourer dreadnought moving to attack the Zephyrian flagship, reported Lieutenant Chen, Marcus's own niece who had joined the Space Navy after the liberation of Earth. Shall we intercede? All human ships coordinate with Guardian Squadron 7, Marcus ordered. Let's show these machines what teamwork looks like. The battle raged for 18 hours. Alliance forces used the cooperative tactics that had proven so effective at Earth, with each species contributing their unique strengths to the combined effort. Human adaptability, Guardian precision, Zephyrian speed, Christech durability, and ancient power worked together in perfect harmony. But it was the smaller moments that made the difference. A human engineer figuring out how to boost Guardian shields beyond their design limits. A Zephyrian navigator finding a path through an asteroid field that let Alliance forces outflank a Devourer formation. A Christech warrior sacrificing their ship to protect a damaged Guardian vessel. When the last Devourer ship finally retreated, nearly 40% of their fleet had been destroyed. The Alliance had taken heavy losses too, but they had held the Nexus system. More importantly, they had proven that the Devourers could be beaten even when they brought their full strength to bear. Standing on the observation deck of Sanctuary Station weeks later, Marcus watched construction crews from a dozen species working together to repair the damage from the battle. Ships that had been mortal enemies just months ago now shared repair docks and technical expertise. The galaxy will never be the same, Architect observed, joining Marcus at the viewport. Is that good or bad? Marcus asked. It is what it needs to be, the ancient voice answered. Though no ancient ship was visible, they seemed to speak from everywhere and nowhere at once. The younger races have learned to work together. They will face challenges we cannot foresee, but they will face them united. Marcus thought about his farm back on Earth, now being tended by a collection of humans guardians and Zephyrians who had formed an unlikely agricultural cooperative. His wheat was apparently now considered a delicacy on 6 different worlds. Any regrets about leaving the quiet life? Architect asked, echoing the same question from months before. Marcus smiled as he watched a human child chase a young guardian through the station corridors, both of them laughing in their own ways. None at all. This is what I was meant to be part of. The war against the Devourers would continue for years to come, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Alliance grew stronger with each victory, each liberated world, each new species that emerged from hiding to join the fight. And at the center of it all was the lesson learned on a small farm in Montana, that sometimes the most ordinary people, in the most ordinary places, can change the course of history simply by refusing to give up. The galaxy had learned to hope again, and that made all the difference as Marcus prepared to depart for the next mission by establishing contact with a species of energy beings who had been hiding. In the cores of stars, he reflected on how much had changed since that evening. Marcus stood in the ruins of what had once been his wheat field, now a battlefield littered with the wreckage of alien machines. The morning sun cast long shadows across the scarred earth, illuminating the twisted metal remains of Devourer forces that would never threaten another world. Around him, Human soldiers and Guardian machines worked together to clear the battlefield and tend to the wounded. The sight would have been impossible to imagine just a week ago, humans and aliens moving in perfect coordination, united by the bond forged in combat. "The casualty reports are coming in," Colonel Martinez said, approaching with a tablet in her hands. Her uniform was torn and stained, but she was alive, and that was what mattered. Marcus braced himself for the numbers. The battle had been brutal, and he had seen too many good people fall. "How bad is it?" "Bad, but not as bad as it could have been. We lost about 30% of our forces, but the Guardians estimate we destroyed over 60% of the Devourer army. That's the worst defeat they've suffered in recorded history." Architect approached them, moving with its characteristic fluid grace despite the damage visible on its sleek form. Several of its limbs had been replaced with temporary repairs, and scorch marks covered its torso where Devourer weapons had found their mark. "The Zephyrian fleet commander wishes to speak with you, Marcus Chen," Architect said. "As the human who initiated this alliance, your words carry significant weight." Marcus looked toward the Zephyrian ships that had landed near the fortress. They were beautiful vessels with hulls that seemed to be made of crystal and metal combined. The beings that emerged from them were tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and faces that reminded Marcus of classical sculptures. "What could I possibly say to them?" Marcus asked. "I'm just a farmer who got lucky." "You are much more than that," Architect replied. "You are the first human to successfully resist the Devourers. You are the one who showed that cooperation between species could overcome their technological advantage. Your words will help determine what happens next." The meeting took place in what had been Marcus's living room, now expanded and modified by Guardian technology to accommodate representatives from 3 different species. Marcus found himself sitting at a table that seemed to grow from the floor itself, facing beings he could never have imagined existing. Fleet Commander Zephys was the leader of the Zephyrian survivors, a tall being with skin that seemed to shift color depending on the light. When she spoke, her voice had a musical quality that made even the most serious topics sound like poetry. "For 50 years my people have hidden in the dark spaces between stars," she said. "We believed we were the last of our kind, that the Devourers had won forever. But today you have shown us that victory is still possible." General Harrison, who had somehow maintained his military bearing despite everything he had witnessed, leaned forward. "What are you proposing exactly?" "An alliance," Commander Zephys replied. "Not just between our 3 species, but among all the survivor races. There are others hiding throughout the galaxy, species that escaped the Devourers but never dared to fight back. If we can prove that resistance is possible, they will join us." Engineer, whose multiple arms were busy analyzing Zephyrian technology samples, looked up from its work. "The Devourer's strength comes from their ability to isolate and overwhelm individual worlds. If we can coordinate our efforts across multiple systems, we can turn the tide permanently." Marcus thought about that. The idea was staggering in scope, a galactic alliance of species united against a common enemy. But after what he had witnessed in the past few days, it no longer seemed impossible. "What would humanity's role be in this alliance?" he asked. Warrior answered before the aliens could respond. "Humans would be the strategists. Your species has shown a unique talent for adaptive warfare and innovation under pressure. These skills would be invaluable in a long-term campaign against the Devourers." Commander Zephys nodded in agreement. "The Guardians have the most advanced technology. The Zephyrians have the largest fleet of survivors. But humans have something we have both lost: the ability to think creatively about warfare." Over the next several hours, they worked out the basic framework of what would become known as the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Human military leaders would work with Guardian scientists and Zephyrian fleet commanders to coordinate resistance efforts across multiple star systems. But there was more to it than just military cooperation. Each species brought unique strengths to the alliance. Human agriculture and manufacturing techniques could help establish secure bases on liberated worlds. Guardian technology could enhance the weapons and defenses of all Alliance forces. Zephyrian ships could provide rapid transportation and communication across vast distances. "We estimate there are at least 12 other survivor species hiding throughout the galaxy," Navigator said, its branching form swaying as it processed data streams. "If we can contact them and prove that the Devourers can be defeated, our combined forces could outnumber theirs for the first time in millennia." Marcus looked around the room at the collection of humans and aliens planning the liberation of the galaxy from his living room. The absurdity of it was almost overwhelming. "There's something I need to know," he said. "Why here? Why my farm? Of all the places on Earth the Devourers could have started their invasion, why did they choose this spot?" Architect's head tilted slightly. "We believe it was intended as a test. The Devourers had identified you as a potentially dangerous individual, a retired military specialist living in isolation. They sent their scouts to test their new infiltration technology against what they considered a challenging but manageable target. They wanted to see if their robot animals could fool and defeat a trained human soldier," Colonel Martinez added. "It was supposed to be a proof of concept before they began full-scale infiltration of human society." Marcus shook his head. "Instead, they walked into the one place on Earth where they would encounter both human resistance and Guardian intervention. The irony is significant," Commander Zephys observed. "In seeking to test their strength, they revealed their weakness, and in trying to eliminate a single human, they triggered the formation of the largest resistance movement in galactic history." 3 days later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Guardian command ship, watching Earth fall away below them. He was part of a delegation traveling to contact other survivor species, carrying the message that the Devourers could be defeated. His farm was being maintained by a team of volunteers, both human and Guardian. The wheat would be harvested on schedule and the cattle were being well cared for. In a way, life would go on as normal, but Marcus knew that nothing would ever be normal again. Humanity had joined a larger community, taken its place among the stars as part of something greater than any single world. "Do you regret leaving your quiet life?" Architect asked, joining him at the observation window. Marcus thought about that. A week ago, his biggest concern had been fixing a broken fence post. Now he was heading into deep space to help coordinate a galactic war. "No," he said finally. "I joined the Marines because I wanted to protect people. The scale is different now, but the mission is the same." As the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, Marcus watched the stars stretch into lines of light around them. Somewhere out there were other worlds, other species, other people who had been waiting 3,000 years for someone to show them that hope was still alive. The war was far from over. The Devourers still controlled most of the galaxy, and they would not give up easily. But for the first time in millennia, they faced organized resistance from united species who had learned that cooperation was stronger than any weapon. And it had all started with a farmer defending his land against impossible odds.